The mysterious deaths of Casey Macpherson-Pomeroy and Caleb Guillory.
This video in no way intends to offend anyone mentioned in it. It is solely for educational reasons and contains information that was found online. Accuracy, completeness, and timeliness are not promised or guaranteed. This is not a full and complete representation of the case, the people, or the investigation, and therefore should not be taken as such.
A reunion of three childhood friends for New Year's celebrations on a paradise island in the Eastern Caribbean sounds like a dream holiday vacation. However, for Casey Macpherson-Pomeroy and Caleb Guillory, their trip to Anguilla in 2018 turned out to be a living nightmare from which neither of them emerged alive. Welcome. This is Crime Recall. Casey Macpherson-Pomeroy, 37, was described as an outgoing, upbeat individual who always made whatever situation fun. He grew up in Eagle Point, Oregon, before relocating to Los Angeles to pursue a career as an actor and producer in 2004. Casey did eventually land minor film roles, such as a cop in The Bold and the Beautiful. But in the end, life in Hollywood did not go as planned, and Casey decided to try something completely different. Casey and his wife, 62-year-old Barbara Fenson-Pomeroy, relocated to the tropical island of Anguilla in mid-2018. Despite the island's population of only about 16,000 people, Casey planned to study medicine at an American medical school there. During a study break in December, 4 months after moving in, Casey invited two of his childhood friends, Caleb Guillory and Chuck Gross, as well as their wives, Carly and Alicia, to spend the new year in Anguilla. Growing up in the small town of Eagle Point, Casey, Caleb, and Chuck had been friends since they were 9 years old. The boys' families were only 2 miles apart. The three were inseparable. The other two followed wherever one of them went. Growing up, Caleb was always over at our house, and the same with Chuck. I remember growing up, and these three big boys going everywhere with us. Although life eventually took Casey, Caleb, and Chuck in different directions, and separated them by over 3,500 miles, their friendship remained strong, and the three would get together whenever possible. So, when Casey invited his friends to fly down for the week between Christmas and New Year's, they said yes without hesitation, not realizing it would be their final time together. The three men and their wives arrive in Anguilla and spend several days enjoying the tropical island and each other's company, most likely having the time of their lives. But everything changed on December 30th, when the couples returned to Casey and Barbara's apartment around 9 p.m. from a nearby beach bar. Caleb realized he had forgotten his shoes moments after entering the house. Caleb and Casey returned to the apartment to retrieve their flip-flops because the bar was only a few minutes' walk away. The two friends had only been gone for about 30 minutes, but something had gone horribly wrong during that time. Caleb collapsed in the living room shortly after returning home, hit his head, and went unresponsive before stopping breathing. After realizing the severity of the situation, Chuck's wife Alicia dashed to a neighbor's house and dialed 911 at 9:49 p.m., requesting an ambulance because her friend was not breathing. The police and EMS took 15 minutes to arrive at the scene, and by then, there was nothing they could do for Caleb. He was discovered lying on his back, with a swollen right eye and blue and black skin. Caleb was pronounced dead at his friend's apartment less than an hour after he had been looking for his shoes at the beach. As if that wasn't enough of a shock, Casey then had a seizure in one of the apartment's bedrooms. He was rushed to Princess Alexandra Hospital, but died minutes later. After two people from the same group died unexpectedly, authorities took Barbara, Alicia, Carly, and Chuck to the hospital for a wellness check. Despite appearing slightly disoriented, None of the four displayed any other troubling symptoms and were quickly cleared by the medical staff. Barbara, Alicia, Carly, and Chuck were then arrested and held at the police station while investigators searched the apartment for clues about what happened. According to the initial statements given to the police by the surviving four friends, Casey and Caleb ordered one rum and coke to share at the beach bar. When they went to look for Caleb's shoes, they left that drink unattended on the ground until the flip-flops were found and the two friends returned to their apartment. Caleb died moments later, and Casey began having seizures before dying 15 minutes later at the hospital. It appeared that someone had spiked their drink. This story, however, changed a little after Barbara, Alicia, Carly, and Chuck were released a few days later. Strangely, despite the fact that no charges of wrongdoing were brought against Casey and Caleb's wives and friends, they were still required to pay $40,000, $10,000 per individual, to leave. Nobody knows what this fee was for or who paid it, but Barbara, Alicia, Carly, and Chuck were released from custody on January 4th, 2019. Barbara would apply for her husband's $1.5 million life insurance policy the very next day. Barbara claims in her lawyer's letter that she was with Casey and Caleb looking for the shoes, and all three were drinking from the same plastic cup as they walked back from the beach bar. Barbara has stated that she became ill as a result of the drink, and that at the time Caleb collapsed to the floor, she was in the bathroom vomiting, which may have been the only reason she survived. Barbara added in the letter that she thinks this was no accident, and that someone purposefully tainted the drink while they were looking for Caleb's flip-flops. Still, filing for the life insurance policy before any questions about what happened had been answered and autopsies had been completed was a strange move. The autopsies for Casey and Caleb began on the same day their wives and friends were released from custody, and the coroner's reports were completed on January 7, 2019. The results, however, did not simply prove that the drinks had been tampered with. Rather, they added to the mystery. Why were the two friends' injuries so different if they had just been poisoned? Caleb died as a result of asphyxiation, strangulation, multiple blunt force traumas, and seizures, according to the autopsy report. Caleb was strangled both manually and with a ligature, such as a belt or rope, according to the coroner. His toxicology report indicated that he had lethal levels of MDA and cocaine in his system at the time of his death. As a result of the lethal levels of cocaine and MDA in his system, Casey died from pulmonary edema, cardiac toxicity, cardiac ischemia, hypothermia, and seizures. MDA, also known as Sally, belongs to the same drug class as MDMA, also known as Molly, ecstasy, or a variety of other names depending on the country. While both substances can produce similar effects, such as empathy, emotional openness, and affection, MDA produces more psychedelic effects and lasts longer. MDA or MDMA produce blood levels in the range of 100 to 250 Ng per ml when taken in a physical recreational setting. Casey's level was 6100 Ng ml, which is more than 24 times higher than what is considered normal. Interestingly, when the police searched Barbara and Casey's apartment shortly after their deaths, they discovered what appeared to be illegal substances, and after obtaining a warrant, more such items were collected as evidence. According to an unnamed island source, these substances, including cocaine and MDA or MDMA, were discovered in Chuck's wife Alicia's makeup bag. However, no charges were filed for drug possession, and no one seemed interested in determining whether an outsider truly spiked Casey and Caleb's drink, or if something far more sinister occurred here. And, as if things couldn't get any more suspicious, Barbara and Carly chose to have their husbands' bodies cremated rather than accept an offer from Barbara's friend to fly the bodies back to the US in his private jet. While this behavior appears unusual, the four survivors claim they were given no other option. Barbara, Alicia, Carly, and Chuck were allegedly presented with two options by the Royal Anguillan Police. In the first scenario, They would accept Casey's death by overdose and Caleb's strangulation. As a result, they would be granted permission to leave the island. The second possibility was that the survivors disagreed with the official findings, which would have required the police to launch a formal investigation. Barbara, Alicia, Carly, and Chuck would have all been considered suspects in this case, and they would have remained on the island. This presumed agreement allegedly included a requirement to cremate the bodies. While it doesn't seem too far-fetched that the authorities on the small island simply wanted to close the case of 2 foreign men's deaths as soon as possible, it's strange that the survivors were forced to choose an option that literally implies Caleb was murdered, yet there would be no investigation. Barbara, Alicia, Carly, and Chuck have painted a frightening picture of Anguillan law enforcement. Even after a coronial inquest was launched in early 2019, the 4 survivors have refused to return to Anguilla. The court hearings have been rescheduled several times due to the absence of Barbara, Alicia, Carly, and Chuck. Casey's stepfather, Chuck Pomeroy, later recalled how the 4 friends acted after the tragedy when they arrived in Eagle Point, Oregon. According to Chuck, Barbara did the majority of the talking. Right from the beginning, they said they were poisoned. From the very beginning, it just didn't feel right to me. I remembered that as they got up to leave, Barbara very seriously said, "Hey, do not talk about this. Don't publicize it or talk about it. You'll cause problems." Then, when she came back a couple of days later, she was very adamant about saying, "Don't say anything. Don't do anything." Barbara's claim that she was also taken to the hospital in Anguilla and only learned of Casey and Caleb's deaths a few days later has also irritated Casey's loved ones. The remark is puzzling because Caleb died at the apartment, and a family member spoke with Barbara on the phone on January 1st while she was in police custody. Casey's death was mentioned during that call. Debony, Casey's sister, has also stated that her brother and his wife had an unusual marriage. Casey, as Debony put it, was living a double life. He had a life with Barbara and then a life in Los Angeles with other people. Casey's good friend and agent had no idea he was married. He had no idea Barbara existed. Furthermore, Casey and Barbara's marriage was kept private, so viewing their marriage license would require a court order. While this detail isn't necessarily significant, it is another oddity in an otherwise complex and bizarre story. Casey Macpherson-Pomeroy and Caleb Guillory's friends and families have yet to receive an explanation for what happened to them. The coroner's inquest is still unfinished because the 4 survivors have refused to return to Anguilla and answer the remaining questions. If Barbara, Alicia, Carly, and Chuck had nothing to do with Casey and Caleb's death, why can't they testify and tell their side of the story? Barbara and Casey's life insurance money is being held up by the coroner's inquest, but she would rather file a lawsuit in federal district court to get paid than return to the island for questioning. Almost 3 years later, no one can explain how 2 alleged poisoning victims died by such disparate means. And we may never know the truth as long as the 4 survivors remain silent. Debony, on the other hand, refuses to give up. I am not going to stop my efforts to raise awareness about this tragedy until I achieve justice for my incredible brother Casey and his friend Caleb. The crime committed is bad enough, but the apparent cover-up by their wives and Anguillan authorities has made this situation all the more painful for us. All we seek is justice and for the true story to come out. Drop a comment below and let us know what you think. If you enjoy this content, then please give this video a like and hit the subscribe button.